this video, we're going to talk about Excel. I love Excel. I think it's a fantastic program to know. It's a good skill to have. I use it a lot in my personal life. I think that no matter what field you're going into, Excel is a really good thing to be able to know and know how to use. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to be covering the topics that are here in, this is the exam 1 review. It's posted in week 2 because believe it or not, we do have exam 1 coming up next week. It's next Tuesday. Summer classes are super, condensed and fast paced. So I'm going to go through, we've already talked about cloud storage. I'm just going to be going through all these items on the topic list here. I'm going to be using Google Sheets, but if you want to use Microsoft Excel, that's fantastic. If you want to use some other application, that's fine by me. As long as you have access to all of these same functions, it should be fine, whichever one you're more comfortable with. So just some really basic vocabulary here. The rows, columns, and cell. So you have a row, that was the wrong thing to open up. I started one earlier. To get a new one, you can just click the plus sign right here to open up a blank one. So here, just a blank spreadsheet. A row is going to be going horizontally. It's here left and right. And we represent them with numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A column is going to be going up and down. It's vertical. We represent them with letters, A, B, C, D, E. A cell is going to be an intersection between a row and a column. So it's like one individual square. So we would name the cell by both the row and column. So you can see, for example, here it tells you that B2 is the active cell right now because I have named column B and row 2. If I wanted to show a range of cells, a range would be like a group of cells that are all adjacent, that are all right next to each other. We use a colon. You can see the example right here in the name box. We use a colon to represent that this is more than one cell and they're all grouped up together. So in this example, all of these cells that are highlighted in blue, they're all in column B. So that didn't change, but they are in different rows, right? These are rows, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see the column, it says everything in between 2 and 9. If I wanted to represent a range going this way, these would all be in the same row. They are all in row 3, but these are in different columns B through F. So you can see an example of that up here in the named box. It's B through F. Okay, so relative reference and absolute reference, I think will make more sense with an example. So a lot of times we want to let the computer work for us. We want to automate some tasks so that we don't have to do little tedious things over and over and over. And one fantastic way that we can do that is using the fill handle, the little black box in the lower right corner of the active cell. And we can use the fill handle to say, we want to tell the computer, hey, I'm typing things out in a pattern. I want you to recognize the pattern and I want you to fill all of the rest of the cells using this pattern that I showed you. That's going to be an example of using relative reference. We're telling the computer, I want you to change the values based on the pattern that you recognize. And it was really revolutionary whenever Microsoft first came out with this in Excel. It really, like, if you've ever seen the commercial for it, it's kind of hilarious actually, but it was like mind-blowing that the computer could do this and could do it very accurately. It was really neat. So I'm going to show you an example of relative reference using the fill handle. So let's maybe give the computer some patterns that it could recognize. One example is if I wanted to list a lot of dates. So earlier you might have noticed whenever I had all of these things open that I have used Google Sheets for in my personal life, one of them is this cattle count. My brother-in-law raises cattle and then he sells them. And so he has land and he raises people's cattle on it and then he charges them per head per day. And so one of the things that I helped him create in a spreadsheet was something that would keep track of the total number of cattle that he had each day so that he could come up with the bill to charge the people whose cattle he had on his land. So that would have been extremely tedious if we had to go through and write the date over and over and over every single day for months on end. That would have, it would have taken a long time and it would have been very boring. Do not do that. Why bother with that when we can let the computer do it for us? The goal is to automate tasks whenever we can. So, and it'll recognize patterns. So we could tell it, for example, beginning in, January 4th of this year. And then I have to tell the computer what pattern I want it to see. So I'm going to have at least 2 examples so it can see what's the difference between the two. So for example, if I want it to say, to give me every day, then I could say that my pattern would be go to the next day. Now, if I highlight both of these, I selected one cell and then I used shift and I selected a second cell and now they're both highlighted. You see my little fill handle. My fill handle is down here in the bottom right corner. If I click on that and I drag it down, however far I drag it is going to be how many cells the computer goes in and autofills with the recognized pattern. This is using relative fill. It changed the date every time based on this new information. We can do this with lots of patterns. Let's say that you wanted to create a spreadsheet for your retirement account. That's another example that I have done before. I have a spreadsheet that takes how much money I have contributed to my retirement account each year, and then I can try to predict how much money will be in it by the time I retire based on different returns, annual returns. And so if I wanted to do something like that, I could say, okay, let's say that you started, you put $1,000 in your retirement account. Okay, that's how much you started with. And so we could say this was year, I'm actually going to move this. I'm actually going to move this one over because let's say we started with 20, you started this year, good for you. Started saving for your retirement. You put $1,000 aside. And then in 2023, so here, once again, the computer can recognize our pattern and I can just autofill it and ta-da, it's going to go through every year for me. Now, the second year, I want to say, well, how much would it grow if it grew by 10%? So I'm going to use a formula for that. I would say, okay, well, it's not just going to be the same 10% every time because the money that you add into your account will be part of your new principal that will continue to grow as well. So I need to use a formula. I need to say, whatever money I had in there before, and if I multiply it by 1.1, that is the same thing as multiplying by 10% and then adding it to the original amount, okay? Because if I multiply by 1, that just gives me back the 1,000, right? Multiplying by 1 just gives you the original number. And if I multiply by 0.10, that's going to give me the 10%. So 1.1 is going to be the 10% plus my original balance. So if I hit enter, that makes sense, right? 10% of 1,000 would be 100. If I add that together, I get 1,100. Fantastic. Now, I want to repeat that same pattern over and over and over. So I see, okay, well, if I do this for, if I put $1,000 in my retirement account and I let it sit there for the next 20 years, how much is it going to be worth? So I'm going to grab my fill handle. I'm going to drag it down. And that $1,000 was worth $5,600 in 20 years by the time I wanted it. So yay, fantastic. This does not look like money. It looks really super messy. So one other thing we can talk about, you've got all of this little formatting up here. You can tell the computer what type of information you're working with. This is money. So I can press the little $sign to tell it that I'm talking about money. And then it's automatically going to format it for me. Notice how it brought me down to 2 decimal places, and it added the $sign, and it also added commas when I got to the thousands place. Now, if you wanted to look at this example of the relative reference, you can, here's another one of those little things we want to talk about. You can tell the computer you want to show the formulas instead of the values that are inside of the cell. So if I come in here, I'm going to hit Control, and it's called a tilde. It's the little like squiggle, and it's probably in the top left corner of your keyboard. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to press Control tilde, and I held it down. I held down Control and hit tilde at the same time. So I had both of them pressed at the same time. And notice how now it's showing me the formulas instead of the amount. And look at what my formula did. This guy is looking at cell D2, which would be this one. That's D2. But whenever I drag it down, the guy underneath it, I don't want it to go off of D2. That would still be my original $1,000. That doesn't make sense because my $1,000 made $100. And now that $100 is generating 10% as well. So I want to take a 10% profit based off of the cell that came right before it, my 2023 balance. So now instead of going off of D2, this guy's going off of D3, the one that came right before it. And all of them are. You see how all of them changed all the way down? I didn't have to type that in. I didn't have to go through and make each one of them change. I could just use the fill handle and drag it down, and it used the relative reference. It said, oh, okay, if I'm constantly looking at the cell that came right before, every time I bring this formula down to somebody new, it's going to look at the cell right before, relative reference. Okay, I'm going to hit Control tilde again. And now you can see that we have our values back. So you can toggle back and forth between the two using that Control tilde. Okay. The other thing we want to look at is absolute reference. What if we do not want to change the cell that we're looking at? So an example of that could be, I keep hitting that one on accident. An example of that is I have one piece of information in one cell, and I want to use that same piece of information for all of the formulas that I'm trying to use. So an example of that could be like a tax rate. If you were multiplying by a tax rate does not change, right? It's going to be the same no matter what all math we're doing with it. So let's say, for example, we have some different things that we bought. So like 3.12 and 14 and 82 and 1.1 and I'm just kind of making stuff up here. And okay, that's enough for an example. So this is going to be some stuff that we purchased at the grocery store. And everything that we bought, we're going to have a total, and it's all going to be charged tax. We're going to have to pay tax on all of it. So one thing that we could do is find the total and then just calculate the tax on it. That's probably what I would do. That's what makes the most sense. But for this example, we're going to calculate the tax on all of them separately, just because I'm trying to show you an example of using an absolute reference. Okay, so an absolute reference does not change whenever you use your fill handle and apply it to a range of cells. So let's say that I had my tax rate. So we're going to say, so here we're going to say our tax rate, and it's going to be 8.25%. Sure, why not? And here I want to make a formula. And if I say, if anytime you create a formula in Excel, I'm sorry I didn't explain this a second ago. Anytime you want to use a formula in Excel, you start with the equal sign. So the equal sign tells it that I'm going to do some direct math in here. And I'm going to say, I want you, right? The amount that I paid multiplied by my tax rate, and that'll tell me how much I owe on the taxes. And then isn't this interesting? It's telling me I owe 0 taxes. That makes no sense, right? We never get to pay 0 taxes. There's like one weekend out of the whole year that you don't have to pay taxes, and it's like a holiday. So you'd be thinking, okay, why does it say 0? Why does that, why isn't it correctly multiplying by the tax rate? Well, let's use our control tilde and let's take a look at our formulas and find out what it's doing. It did a relative reference here, right? It said, I'm going to go down through G. So here I'm going down through G, 2 through 8. Yes, that's what I wanted. This right here is correctly getting all of my prices. And then it is multiplying by, here's the problem. It did a relative reference for what it multiplied by as well. So the first one here is fine. That's good, 0.0825, that's fine. But then all of the rest of these, when it starts multiplying by L4, L5, L6, L7, there's nothing there. So these guys are multiplying by 0, and it's saying anything times 0 is 0. So we did not want the value that it was using in the formula to change, even though we applied it to a range of values. We wanted it to always multiply by this same cell. So here we want an absolute reference. And in order to do that, in order to make something an absolute reference, you include a $sign. So you can do that a couple of ways. You can add the $sign for either just the row or just the column. So for example, I could lock in column L, but I could let the rows change. Or I could lock in row 1 and let the columns change, either way. If you want to lock in both, if you want to say, I want you to always use L1, which in our case, that's not what we want L2. I want to always use the specific cell L2. I'm going to put a $sign in front of both of them. Now, if this is my correct formula and I use my little fill handle to bring it down, you can see that I'm no longer multiplying by 0. If I hit Control tilde, you can see that even though this change, I am correctly grabbing the different prices, this did not. They were all multiplied by the same set tax rate. Okay. Yay. If I wanted to find out how much it costs total, I could say I want this cell plus this cell, right? And then, yeah, I would have to do that for all of them. And then we could get our total right here. So we could format it and make it look nice. We could go up here and tell it to add a border down below it to sort of differentiate. Here is my total. If I want a total, I can use the formula sum. Sum is when you add up a range of values. And notice that it has that column. Notice that it has that colon, I'm sorry, for our range that, and it highlights it for you even. Did you see that? It had on like specifically the ones that I wanted. So these are all column I, but they're going from row 2 through 8. And now I have my total bill. So those are examples of relative reference, absolute reference, showing the formulas, and using fill handle. The functions, we've already seen some. We'll do an example of min, max, and average. So let's say, what is the minimum and what is the maximum? Let's say you're trying to figure out where all your money's going. What are you spending all of your money on? So I could say, what is the minimum? And I want to know from this value through this value. To highlight multiple items like that, I just held down the shift key. And then here I want to know what is the maximum value. I do want that exact same range. So I'm just going to tab over to select what it's suggested. So is this correct? Is the minimum value here $1.19? Yes, it was. Is the maximum $88? Yes, it was. So good deal. We can really kind of pinpoint what we're spending all of our money on. Something was really expensive. I don't know what we spent $82 on at the grocery store, but it needed to be worth it because that was the highest thing we bought. Average, we'll find the mean average. It will add all the values up and then divide by the number of items. So I think depending on what system you're using, sometimes it's just AVG. It's the abbreviation AVG. And then sometimes the word is spelled all the way out, AVERAGE. So I'm going to find the average. So it added them all up for me and divided. Rand between is going to give you a random value between a designated range that you give it. And then if is a conditional statement. It says, I want you to do this if and only if some certain condition is met. I love using if statements in Excel. What would be a good way that I could find this? So maybe we have some kind of coupon and we can get, like on Amazon when you get free shipping, but it only applies if you have spent some total amount of money. So we could say, so let's say that I wanted to make a formula and it'll be if. And so this is going to just tell me true, false, and what do I want it to do if it's true and what do I want it to do if it's false. So logical expression, what that means is, what do you want it to consider? What do you want to know? So if I was going to say like we get free shipping if we spent over $100, that's going to be our condition that we're looking for. Did we spend over $100? So I want to know if this particular cell was greater than $100. That would be my condition. And then we could tell it, well, what do you want it to do if it's true? Well, if it's true, then it gets $0 because you had no shipping if you spent over $100. What do you want it to do if it is false? Well, if you didn't spend over $100, then you're going to have to pay $30 shipping. Okay. So we'll say this is going to be our shipping charge. So we did not have to pay any shipping at all because our bill was over $100. But let's say that it was not over $100. Let's go through and make this guy 0. And let's go through and make this guy 0. And you'll notice that now we have only spent $66. So that's less than 100. So now our shipping is 30. We got charged. So if you wanted to kind of take a look at that again, you can see it right up here. This is some condition that I want it to evaluate to see if it's true. Is the value inside of this cell greater than 100? If that is true, what value do you want to set in this cell? Nothing. You don't have to pay anything for shipping if you spent all your money. And then what value do you want it to be if it is false? I'm going to charge you for shipping if you didn't spend enough. Okay. I'm just going to Control Z back out to where we had it. Okay. And I believe we have now covered all of the items on that topic list. We have, fantastic. So then when you have an assignment over Excel and you go into your spreadsheet, you're going to create a header. You're going to type in some information. You're going to get some data off of the MSU website. It tells you to increase your width and heights as necessary. So that's one thing that I didn't show you. So like, let's say right here, you kind of can't see that full date very well. What you can do is you can click up here and you can drag to resize. You notice whenever I hover my mouse there over the column, the width, that it kind of gives me double arrows because I can change it. If you do that and you double click, it will automatically resize your columns for you and it will make it large enough to hold your widest item. So that's kind of convenient. Nope, we were over here. Okay, so then you're going to use a formula and we see right here, it's going to use an absolute reference. So we have the dollar signs. It's an absolute reference to a cell because there's a dollar sign in front of the row and the column. We're going to use the fill handle, that little box on the bottom right where you can just drag to go to this range of cells. Okay. And then I'll show you how to merge and center really quickly. So let's say that like you wanted to create a nice looking heading. So I wanted all three of these. I'm going to say this is my like grocery bill statistics. So this is going to be my grocery bill statistics. And I want this to be my heading. And I want this heading to be applied to all three of these columns because this is all part of my grocery bill data. This tool, this little button right here, it looks like boxes and it has the arrows going in. If you hover over it, it'll say merge cells. If you highlight the cells that you want to merge together, merge means that instead of them being individual cells, they're all going to be like merged into just being one cell. So if I merge these three, you notice that they're no longer separated. I lose the lines in between there. They've all been kind of merged into one item. If I wanted to format this, I have all the tools right here. So we can center it. We could make it bold. We could change the size, the text, the font, whatever you wanted to do. The little background color, make it a little light gray. Beautiful. Okay. And then finally, you want to insert a chart. So let's do that as the last thing we're talking about Excel. So I'm going to make a chart. Let's make a time graph. Let's make a timeline of our beautiful IRA data. So this will be the year and this will be the balance. So I'm going to highlight all of the cells that I want the chart to be applied to. And then I'm going to go to insert and I'm going to go to chart. And the computer will actually auto suggest the chart that it thinks makes the most sense. It's going to auto suggest the type of chart that it thinks is most useful. So here, if I'm showing change over time, the most appropriate graph for that would be a line graph. You could go up here and change to different types of charts if you wanted to. The program or the assignment tells you to use a 3D pie chart, which would be this one right here. But there's lots of different charts available to you that you can go in and do as well. Okay. You can change the title. You can go in here. We are just going to keep a line chart. That's fine. You can change your axes. You can go through and I have it hidden behind my little thing right here, but you can go to customize and you can change lots of data about your chart as well. And I do believe that's everything you would need for Excel to be able to complete the assignment and also to have covered all the topics you need for exam 1, which is coming up next Tuesday. If you have any questions over any of it, or you want to see some more examples, come by the Zoom chat or email me. Be happy to answer any questions over email as well. Thank you.